Welcome, all pregnant families, midwives or birth workers. This is Tracy Anderson Askew, your host for the Transform Your Birth podcast, changing your mind about birth one story at a time. Each week, we will be exploring a birth story through the lens of what birth can teach us. I'll be digging deep into each story so you can learn what it is that can change the way a birth unfolds. We can't control birth, but we can influence it. So listen in to find out how. Enjoy. Alicia in her pregnancy didn't really believe she could have an unmedicated birth. But after doing the Transform Your Birth course, she starts to open her mind to new ways of thinking. She ends up not even wanting the drugs during her labour. I love the level of detail Alicia goes into when sharing her story. She weaves together the different twists and turns of her birth experience and the impact this had on her mind state. She was exceptional in how she adapted from going in to have an induction and being sent home because they were too busy. This happened twice. She was incredibly gracious. And on the third attempt, they were able to get the labour going. She shares how she managed the intensity of labour, vaginal examinations, and how she made the different decisions by asking questions. There's such great wisdom in this episode, so enjoy listening to Alicia's story.
Before we begin, a note from our sponsor. This episode has been brought to you by Transform Parenting, an organisation that provides courses, coaching and community from pregnancy through to the first 7 years of a child's life. Most of the stories you will hear through this podcast are graduates of the Transform Your Birth workshop held in Canberra. Our Transform Your Birth Today course is now available to anyone, anywhere, at any time, and includes all the wonderful wisdom of this course and live weekly catch-ups when you need it with our host, Tracy. For a little taste, please accept our pregnancy gift offer, which contains free the first few lessons and some essential wisdom for pregnancy. The link can be found in these show notes or visit transformyourbirth.com.au. And now for the episode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome again to the Transform Your Birth podcast. And with me today is lovely Alicia. Hello, Alicia. Thank you for coming. Alicia's only 9 weeks out of the birth room. She's got a little daughter called Allegra. And Alicia has a great story to share, particularly around mindset. So there's a lot of really good stuff that's going to come out of this conversation. So Alicia, you were pregnant with little Allegra. How are you feeling about the prospect of giving birth? And then what sort of preparation did you do?
Yeah, I think I was really nervous. I also, like, a little bit of my story, I'd had 2 miscarriages before. So this was, just my dream come true. But I had that anxiety, I think I carried over a little bit. And then it got to the due date and she wasn't here. And then it was 1 week after the due date and I was doing everything. I was walking, I was trying to, get out there and bouncing on the ball. And then the midwife sort of asked me to come in for a 41-week appointment. So I was just feeling anxious because everyone was asking me, where's the baby? I'd shared my due date with everyone, which I should have said a general time. I know you advised that. Now I know the importance of that.
Yeah, don't tell people your due date, everyone.
No.
It becomes an obsession and it's very ambiguous date anyway. Yeah.
Definitely. And like my due date was Valentine's Day and it was my mum's birthday on that day. So everyone, it was an exciting day for everyone, but I think, and then I was sort of a week over. So I was feeling quite anxious about that. And I even remember having the midwife appointment a day after my due date and I was like, oh, I won't need to go to that one because she'll be here already. My pregnancy just took a bit longer.
Yeah. So you were anxious in your pregnancy, and rightly so. When people have gone through loss, it's very hard to get excited and to connect with this baby. You then needed to do some preparation. Tell us about the preparation you did and what impact that had on that anxiety that you were carrying.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was also having a tough work situation, but I remember looking at your course. My mum had studied midwifery in the past, and a lot of people recommended Transform Parenting. So, and I'm the over-prepared type person. So I was watching a lot of YouTube videos. I was watching a lot of your podcasts as well. But I found that your course was really good, not only in terms of preparing for birth, but with my work situation where, they were trying to get me to work 12, 16-hour days when I was 30 or so weeks weeks pregnant, and I had the potential to have maternity leave, but I was I was at risk of sort of whether I would continue with my job or not, or whether there'd be redundancies and cuts. So that was really stressful. And yeah, in terms of preparing, I did your course and it helped me, yeah, with preparing for birth, but also with that situation. I think I was just really worried what would happen. And I didn't want to have another loss. I thought if I was that stressed, something
Yeah.
like that could happen. But I think, the mindset and just, using your breathing, coming back and choosing love, that really helped me, and understanding biologically what was happening, and understanding that everything, all different things are going to happen in your life, but the only thing you can control is how you react to it, and you can't control it, but you can influence it. I think that was one of the main things I got from your course. So, maybe things don't go as expected. And I also remember you sort of saying you're going on a beautiful trip to Italy, but what happens if you end up in India? What are you going to do? Like how, and that's sort of something that happened throughout my pregnancy. There were many twists and turns, but I could control what happened with where I was, but I couldn't necessarily. I mean, I remember when you first used that analogy, and I was like, well, I'm hopping on the boat to Italy. I'm going to rowboat. And then
Nobody's deviating my plans.
that's it. But my husband Ross was like, no, I think the exercise is more, what are you going to do when you can't go on the rowboat and you've got to be in that different situation? And I remember other people in the room at the time sort of saying, they'll enjoy it and they'll see some beautiful sights there instead. So that's what I chose to do. And I feel like it's gone on to my parenting as well. Like things don't always go.
That's really great. I love that you
Yeah.
put that up, because I think one of the fears that we often hold when we're pregnant is the loss of control, the fact that we don't know what's going to happen on the day. We don't even know when the baby's going to arrive. And creating and cultivating and maintaining the right mindset to hold yourself through this mysterious thing called birth is really important. And part of what the mind needs to know is, if I'm planning on going, and this is a great metaphor, to Italy, and I end up in India, how am I going to deal with that? What level of agency and capability can I bring to that situation so that I still feel like on some level I've got an ability to control, like you said, to control how you respond. And that, what that does then is unloads the tension within the subconscious, allowing you to be okay with the fact that you are going into this mysterious thing called birth. And I love, Alicia, how you've brought up about, stress in pregnancy and sometimes the demands that are made on pregnant women through that time is too much. And your whole system, particularly as you get heavily pregnant, really wants to nest. It just wants to disconnect from that busy, noisy, demanding world to just pottering around at home. So you were able to use those tools even to manage that.
Yeah, that's right. And I was due to go back to work. Sort of the Christmas break came around, and I was going to work right up until a week before she was born, or before she was due. But I ended up just not going back in the new year, and I had a couple of months. And not only like did that help me in my pregnancy, but just holistically, I think it helped me with recovery and just having that time to stop. I'm a very busy person, career driven, and I was always like, I'm going to be that mum that does it all. That was and I thought, a lot of surprises have come along the way since I've had her as well, about, just how much she needs me, especially in this first little while. But I think just having that time for a couple of months, like I got to have January and February, given that she was late as well, to just, focus on, this new chapter in my life, and, do all the little nesty things, preparing all the outfits. And I feel very blessed to do that. But I was also, that was making me more nervous when I was due, because I was like, I've had all this time, and I want to have more maternity leave with her rather than by myself. And then, yeah,
I bet you don't regret taking that though, Alicia, that time. Nesting is a thing. We often refer to nesting as cleaning things you normally wouldn't clean, but it's a bit bigger than that. It's part of your system knowing and recognizing something big is about to happen and to change in your life, and you're building up your energy reserves and your ability to make this transition. So I'd caution women who are listening to this, who have a desire to work right up until the end, so they've got more time with the baby, and that's completely understandable. That makes sense. But there is a need for that pregnant mother to disconnect. And if you're on the go, on the go, on the go, you're often pushing the labour away because you're telling your baby you're not in your nest.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely how I felt, and I'm really grateful for that time to slow down. I was trying everything, and I was still, yeah, trying to probably control it a bit, Tracy, as well. I was like, I'm going to be on the exercise ball. I'm going to go walking. I was going swimming like very regularly, and I thought, oh, she's definitely going to come. So to an extent, and you know how I felt about your course, I loved it, and I thought, oh, that's great for those, people who are really mindful. But I thought, oh, I'm a bit of a busy person. I don't know if it'll work for me. And even through to the birth, I was like, I don't know if I can go without drugs. Like, I don't know if I'll be able to do that myself, but it's great for those people. But yeah, it did help me in the end. Yeah.
Very interesting. So you got up to 41 weeks, and the pressure often starts at 40 weeks, which is ridiculous, but typically most babies will come before 42 weeks, but even some babies need longer than that to grow. So, there's no specific area, but 95% of babies are generally born between 37 and 42 weeks. That's the zone of birth. The due date means nothing. But on that note, you started to feel the pressure, and you came to one of our catch-ups. I do, with the Transform Your Birth Today and the workshops, I do weekly catch-ups for 30 minutes, checking in on our families, making sure that when things come from left field, they know how to manage that. So tell us about that experience of the pressure of being induced.
Yeah, so I had the 40-week appointment, and then they said the next appointment will be at the hospital, which was a bit different. I'd been sort of in a community-based setting. I didn't have the continuity program, just given that I'd had a couple of losses in the past. I didn't call up early enough to get in. I just wanted to wait a bit longer this time. But I managed to find the day that the same midwife was working. So I got to have the same lady, and I feel that really helped me. And then, yeah, I was seeing her in the community, and then got to see her at the hospital for the 41 week. So I felt a little bit more supported because I had that beautiful midwife.
Yeah.
And so I went in there, and then she was monitoring me, and we were in birth suite sort of looking at how Bub was going, and she was going really well. But then all of a sudden the doctor came in, and it was an international based doctor. And she just sort of said, I don't want you to go past 40 weeks plus 10. So that was in 3 days. And also, now that I look at the reason I bring up that she was international is because there's a lot of different advice internationally around how long you should go. And the more that I looked into it, that was one particular culture that believed you should be 40 plus 10 days. And it can really vary. As you said, generally it's by 42 weeks. But so then the pressure was kind of on. And she said, we'd like you to come and be induced in a few days' time. The thing I didn't realize as well, like I was very much, I'm sort of bringing out that controlling side, but I was like, okay, well, I like this date. I mean, 24/2/24, that'd be, I was, you'll laugh.
Checking out the astrology charts.
That's it. And also it was a leap year. So I was like, I don't want it to come on a leap. All these type of things that I was thinking about at the time. And then once I was into it, it had nothing to do with it. But yeah, so they said they'd like me to be induced, and they sort of mentioned to come in on a particular date. But then I was like, I think I'll go for the Friday, and let's book in for that. And because my midwife is there, who is so lovely, she's like, what do you want to do? And she very much put it on to me, but I probably did not exactly understand what being induced meant. It's not something I'd looked at as much. I'd looked at birth and all that sort of naturally. I just didn't think I was going to be induced. And my lovely midwife, she's like, is that what you want? And because she was there, I was like, yeah, I think that's what I want. But actually, I probably didn't know enough about exactly what being induced meant and what that would mean for me. And then from there, Tracy, the Friday came around, and
Did you come to the catch up though?
I think
Induction, did that help?
I came to a different catch up actually, to be honest. I think it was on the Thursday before I was induced, and you were talking about something different, but you were so generous. I was like, I think I'm going to be induced. And yeah, you were really nice about it and just said, if that's what's needed at that point, it can still be a beautiful birth.
Yeah. And I usually coach people how to manage it and what to negotiate on the day.
Yes,
To
that's
also
right.
be aware around the different stages and the
Yeah,
time.
and you
Yeah.
you said something that I remember was like you'd like it to simulate a natural birth.
Yeah.
I just really remember you saying that, and so that's what I checked because they gave me a form at the hospital as well to fill out in terms of a birth plan. So I had that, and I just wrote. I remember updating it once I knew I was going to be induced. I'd like it to simulate a natural birth, not too strong of drugs too soon.
Yeah. Good. That's great. So what
Yeah.
ended up happening?
So I went in, so I have a lot of details to share with you, but I find them really interesting. And if I was listening to someone's story, I'd find this interesting. But I remember that Friday, I was like, okay, it's my last Friday before I'm going into hospital. Let's go out to a cafe with my husband. So we went out for breakfast and let's go for a walk. And I got him to take that day off work as well the morning. He's like, should I still work? And I was like, no, let's spend time together. And then we went for a walk around our suburb. And I remember it was kind of a stormy day. I didn't tell anyone that I was being induced in my family or friends because I just didn't want that pressure of them worrying exactly when I was in hospital.
Yeah.
And so we're doing all that. And then I was like, I got my hair done as well. And I was like, I did all my makeup and outfit. And I was like, let's take a let's do a photo shoot. I love modeling. So we did a photo shoot. But we just like renovated our house, but and then I was looking on Pinterest. I mean, it's a whole thing. And then we had our playlist. I was listening to that. I was making sure I had everything, ready, the bags packed, the snacks. Make sure I have your tracks downloaded for meditation, and your Spotify playlist as well. So I had all of that ready to go. And then we were, yeah, like makeup was done, hair was done. We were ready early to go to the hospital in case of parking. And then that's where it sort of goes that we were going to Italy. We ended up in India because we went to the hospital. We got there, and it's not like I expected them to roll out the red carpet, but it's different to when
Oh,
you're, yeah, why not? But it's different to when you're naturally going, in the middle of the night. I had initially thought, oh yeah, if I'm going in the middle of the night, it'll be a bit more chaotic and have the bag packed by the door. But I was like, now like it's booked in, it's an induction. So they'll know we're coming. We'll go on time. They said, come at 3 o'clock. So I think we got there at 2:45. But then we arrived and it was chaotic. I saw my midwife, that I'd had in that continuity, my own little continuity thing, because I knew when she was working, but she seemed a bit stressed and she sort of waved to us. But because I was not in active labor, I was just, being induced. She sort of waved, but I got the sense that it wasn't very urgent. And then waited around there on the couch and saw people coming in and out and rushing around. And then finally they took us through to the ward, and I was in a room with two beds, which I'd never expected to be in. I thought you'd get, yeah, I don't know what I thought, but I thought hopefully I'd get my own room. And then yeah, I was just trying to have a rest. Everyone said just rest as much as you can before you go into it. um, and then probably about between 3 and 5 hours later, no one talked to us, no one checked in. And then they just said, sorry, we're not going to be able to induce you today. It's a stormy day. And whenever there's a storm, there's too many people, and it's not safe to proceed at this time. So go home, have a spicy dinner, go for a walk, have sex, all that sort of stuff, bounce on your ball, and come back tomorrow at 3. So it was mentally challenging. Like, and that's not
yeah.
something I thought of because I
Yeah.
didn't think, especially when you're induced, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to be induced, all that stuff. And I was like, okay. So
You've
then,
raised a really interesting point here. I know here in Canberra, the Canberra Hospital will give you a period of time to be induced. So we'll say, oh, you're likely to be induced within the next, I don't know, from Wednesday to Friday. So just be ready to answer the phone in the morning and we'll see if we can fit you in. And even that approach in itself highlights how important exactly is this induction. If there's no medical reason to induce, if there's no signs that the baby isn't doing well and your actual pregnancy is progressing nicely, you would have to question the need to induce, even if you're getting closer to that 42 weeks, simply because we don't know when babies are born, when they're fully cooked. And every child is completely different, in the same way that any child, hitting puberty is going to hit puberty at different times. So the growth of humans varies enormously, and it's an important thing. If you are choosing to induce, you're doing it for a very good reason, because you are setting up a completely different trajectory for that birth to unfold. Now, in the end, Alicia, did you end up being induced?
I did, but I actually had the same thing happen the next day. So they said, come back tomorrow at 3 o'clock. And then the
They
problem
sent you
was,
home.
yeah, and the problem was the communication and the amount of time I had to stay in the hospital in that bed, thinking it's about to happen, having all my snacks, having, as I said, I was
That's
so
hard.
prepared, doing the photo shoot, all that stuff. But we went back, and they do monitor you, so they put the bands on you and see how you're doing, and everything was fine. So that was reassuring. But then the second day we went back, and we were in that same, we went to that same room again and had the same experience. And this time they said, oh, sorry, there's a full moon. Um, and it was,
To a full moon. Oh,
yeah, and
God.
and I just never knew about. Apparently, it is a thing.
Yeah.
That I didn't expect that to happen again. And again, we'd waited around for sort of 5 hours or so, and then one of the midwives, and it just depends who's on shift. There were a lot of locum people coming and going because it was so busy. I just thought there would be a lot more around having the same person or knowing what was going on. But as the shifts changed, in the evening, the person said, I don't know what's going on. And I remember someone coming on shift and saying, oh, here, I'll turn on the TV for you. The last thing I wanted was to watch TV after waiting around. And then the TV was actually broken. And I was at North Canberra Hospital as well, by the way. Yeah, and so that's what happened. And then, yeah, someone said, then someone came to clear the dinner plates. And then my husband was like, oh, do we get dinner? But he realized he doesn't get it. It's only the patient. And because I was actually never admitted on both of those days. So we
Right.
didn't have a meal for us. That's the things you think about. But
Yeah.
then yeah, someone came around and said, "Oh, you're still here. I thought you'd been sent home 2 hours ago because you're not getting induced today." And then there was a lovely board where they'd written our names, and it was like today's plan. They have like on the little board, and it said today's plan, let's have a baby. So anyway, so it happened a second time. So then the third
Third
day,
time lucky.
yeah, third time lucky. We went on the Sunday, and this time my midwife was there that I'd seen in the community multiple times, and she's like, "I'm so sorry this has happened to you," and she said we were really impressed with how you handled it. Because when they told us you go home, and they told us the same thing again, go home, have a spicy dinner, all those little things. Um, and my midwife said, you're so beautiful how you handled it, because there were actually other couples in here that were due for the same thing. And they said, no, we're not leaving, that we're going to be induced today. And that she said, we really appreciate how you handled it. And then she said, what room do you want on the Sunday? And she looked around and she's like,
Patient care.
yeah, and she's like, I'll find one that's, you don't have to be in a room with two people. And she's like, I'm definitely going to make sure you get this induction tonight, because I know that, yeah, this is very
But
mentally challenging.
I can understand why people would be upset about that, because you get geared up for one thing. But I think your choice to go home and have a good night's sleep holds you in good stead. And it's very difficult to sleep in a hospital. So that was pretty wise that you did that. So how about you tell us how the labour unfolded now?
Yes, definitely. Sorry, it's a long story to even get there. So yeah, so then my beautiful midwife that I'd had put the cervidil tape in that evening on the Sunday on the third day. And yeah, we watching a show that night. We were just chilling out. Husband was lying on the spare couch there, and we had like not too bad of a night. But then slowly, by the Monday morning, I started having contractions or these pains, yeah, and they were coming semi-regularly. And then I had them throughout the day on Monday. I think as well, being on that ward and having people coming and going, and I had those painful tightenings. And I had people coming, and I didn't have any meds or anything like that, but I think the people coming and going really threw me off, and people changing shift. I know that it's not something you should think about, but my job is about culture within organizations, and I could just see things about the culture that were annoying me. And I'd have people sort of coming in the room, and they'd say, breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. And I'd I'd done a lot of work on your breathing, and I was trying to breathe through the nose.
Helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd really researched it a lot.
Mhm.
And then I had someone coming in, and because I was getting these, intense feelings, I kept telling myself, don't call it pain, intense feelings. And that definitely helped. But sometimes I was like, I'm in pain. And I'm like, no, intense feelings. Um, and yeah, breathing in through the nose and everything. And then someone would come in the room and say, oh, you can do anything for 60 seconds. And I just thought, who are like, and I kept saying to my husband, who are these people? What are, like, I understand people have different views, but I've done this course, I've done my learnings, I know what I want to do. I don't know this person. They haven't hardly introduced who they are,
Yeah.
changing shifts. And that's something I found. And because we'd had those 2 other days with people coming and going all the time, I found that really challenging.
That's a really important point that you've made there around the environment. Women, Sarah Buckley talks a lot about this, who's done a lot of research around the hormones of labour, and she talks about undisturbed birth and uses the word unobserved birth. Now, any mammal that's in labour does not want random people coming in and out of their space, because it's going to put them more in a hyper alert state, which is the antithesis of what we actually want for labour land. So having people coming in and out can be really, really off-putting. Now, we don't always have control over our birthing space, but don't be afraid to exercise some level of, dimming the lights, putting on some music, or just creating an environment so people, when they walk in, can read the room and understand, okay, keep it low. And having partners to say, shh, she knows what she's doing, thank you. You don't need to talk. And when women feel that sort of circle of security, then they're free to let themselves go into the space of working with the birth, not against it. But it's very difficult when you've got random people coming in and making random comments without having any relationship with you. It's quite disruptive to that labour, and will influence that labour. So what sort of tools were you using as you were dealing with the sensations of the labour? Tell us how you manage those
Yeah,
tightenings.
actually, I did have a birthing comb. That was probably, I know it was, and I listened to one of your podcasts where someone said, keep your palms open, don't use that. But I just had a birthing comb, and that really worked for me. That was just something to focus on. And I had that. I had my breathing as well, and I had low sounds. So I tried to just slow down, have
Yeah.
low sounds, and just go with my body. And just, I
Mm.
felt like I'd researched everything so much. So I just tried to go with like naturally with what I'd already researched and what I knew from your course, with breathing through the nose, slowing it down, and breaking up the breath too. So that really helped.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
And adding a little pause between each breath. Mm.
that's it. Yeah, yeah. So I was doing that. But yeah, I was really challenged mentally with all these people coming and going. I think that was the hardest thing for me.
Right.
And then at one point, so on the Monday, yeah, I was in the ward all day. I think I was just worried what other people thought of me. And I think it was around, now that you've said, you need your private space. I was next to the desk of where the nurses were, and I was just getting caught up in, I could hear them talking about me. And I told Ross, like, turn up the music. And they checked me that morning as well. And it was just the time of year when new grads had started working full time as well. So which was good because I felt extra support. There was like new grads and their supervisors. And one point they were checking me, and the person to collect the dinner trays was coming in and out. And I remember those midwives sort of saying, no, we're getting checked now. And that was good. But yeah, I think the breathing, the comb, I did use the shower a couple of times as well. And eventually when I went into the birth suite, I used the bath too. Sorry, I'll try not to keep going on this part for so long. But yeah, so then I was in on Monday. all day, the low sounds, all of that, and it was kind of ramping up. That evening, I went over to Birth Suite to get checked because I did feel, it was getting more intense, and I had that Cervidil in. And after 24 hours, they like to take that out. So we went across to Birth Suite, got checked, and I think I was about 4 centimeters dilated. I wasn't prepared for the. There was this lovely little woman who was a doctor, very petite, about my age, and that she said she's going to check me, but she actually just shoved like a few fingers up there, and it was really painful, Tracy. And I was not, I just, I mean, maybe that was my own bias of what she looked like. I was like, oh, she looks really sweet, but that was something that happened, and I didn't expect it to be that intense from the doctor when she checked me.
Sometimes when doctors and midwives do something every day, like vaginal examinations, they forget that they're walking on sacred ground. And particularly when you don't know the person who's doing it, I think it doesn't hurt to say, I'm going to give you permission to do this, but I want you to be gentle. And if you're doing anything I don't like, I'm going to tell you and you're going to listen. Are we clear about that? Now, it's not that they're doing it with any ill intent, absolutely not. And it might have been because, she, having small hands, she might have felt she needed to go that extra mile to really get the information that she needed. But there are ways of doing it that don't cause the mother to tense up, and that's ideally the goal. So always remember who owns your vagina, and it's yours. And
Yeah.
you're the one in charge of that. But I've heard other mothers talk about that and feeling quite violated through vaginal examinations. And if you've got a history around that, that can be very, very triggering. So I think that's a really good point that you've made.
Yeah, and I think as well, like the previous examinations I'd had from the midwives and everything, they'd asked for consent. They were very gentle though. And so when they said they were doing that again, I
Thought it was
thought the
the same.
experience, yeah, I thought it was the same. And especially, it's kind of a reverse bias where, you might see a guy and you'd be like, oh, like I don't want him to, he looks big and burly. He might be no good, but he could be really gentle. But I was the other way where I thought, oh, she looks really sweet and like a nice petite little doctor. She won't sort of, but you just don't know. So I do think it's important to set those boundaries.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And so from there I was in birth suite, and it was getting more, feelings were getting more intense, especially after that. I felt like it was ramping up a little bit. Also and they asked me to take the Cervidil tape out because it had been 24 hours. I thought they were going to do that, and I didn't know what the Cervidil tape would look like. I was surprised that it kind of was a bit like a tampon, and like I saw some blood in there, which I hadn't seen for a long time. So just, yeah, something that I didn't really know much about. And then I was in that room for a while, and they were sort of talking about breaking my waters. But they thought that I was not dilated far enough. And I was rocking around on the exercise ball, had my hands up like this, and I was getting those intense feelings. Felt the need to go in the shower because it was just quite painful. And by that stage, I had like a dress on, but I was like, just getting so many examinations and everything. I felt a bit like a flasher, but I guess that's what happens when you're on the wards. And then they made a plan to break my waters the next morning. So then we went back to the ward. The feelings were getting more and more intense. Like I don't think I slept all that night and morning. And then in the morning, I think it was about 5 a.m. or so, we went across to birth suite because someone on the ward checked me and said, oh, yeah, you're dilated enough. We'll take you over. And I remember just kind of walking from the ward to the birth suite, and they said, oh, you look rough. Like that's what one of the people said as we were walking over. And I'm like, yeah, I feel rough.
Nice
And
comment.
yeah, that's right. And when I was on the ward as well, I said, look, I'd really like to be in the bath if I can. And eventually, and like the rooms weren't opening up too, people were giving birth. Just some, you might not get the room you want. I wasn't sure if I'd get a bath, but we waited and we were patient, and they were going to, they had a plan in place. So we got a nice room with a big bath. And when I went across, it was actually all set up, and there was a beautiful midwife, and the flickering candles were on, and the bath was ready, and I could go in that. So it was really lovely to go across and have that in the
Yeah,
morning.
nice.
Yeah. And then yeah, so I was in the bath a bit, and then the shifts changed again. So there was another midwife again. I probably had seen 10 to 20 different staff members over the 5 days. And that stressed me out a bit because I had to explain my story again but I remember the lovely midwife actually wrote on the chart, she wrote transform parenting, that I'd done that. And I really liked that because she obviously knew that I had that education and that's what I wanted to do. And my birth plan was always to go natural as possible. But then it was time to break the waters. And I remember just sort of saying, what does that mean? Because I didn't really know.
Good question. That's a really good question. And did they
Yeah,
explain what might happen?
yeah, she explained it and she explained it well. But I just, yeah, went back. I was like, wait a second, I don't even know what is, because it all just happens quickly. Like you have all the learning and everything, but then it just happens so quickly in the hospital, or they're like, this is happening, that's happening. So she broke my waters, and like fluid started to come out a bit, and the contractions started to go up a bit. They put a drip on as well, given that it was an induced labor. And then they were and I said, I'd like this to simulate a natural birth as much as possible, but throughout the day, they kind of amped that up a bit. And then, yeah, by the evening, I was starting to push, um, and different people coming on shifts again. And yeah, I was starting to push, and I remember that part. It was getting intense. Um, and probably after an hour or so of pushing, I'd say, or just having that urge, and it felt like doing big poo. Like is a good way to explain it as well. I never knew what it kind of felt like, but just feeling that, um, I was getting more and more dilated, and I felt like everything was progressing. But then in the evening, and it was probably around 7:30. They were like, "Oh, we're going to need you to stop pushing." Because there's actually a teardrop shaped little part of your cervix that Bub's head is coming up against. And we need that to melt away before you deliver. So they said at that point, you can have morphine, you can go in the bath, you can have an epidural. And I just said, I'll go in the bath because I'd prefer to, stay natural. But I was already feeling that intense feeling to push. So I was in the bath, and then they're like, do your breathing. But it's just so hard when you feel like you naturally need to push. So I was like, and I was trying to do those low sounds like, ooh, ooh. And then I just remember going, rah, because I just, it was just that instinct.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was really hard. And they said, if we try for a while, and if you can't, if that little teardrop shaped thing doesn't go away, we'll have to get the doctors to check you in a little while. And so I remember I still had those bands on, the pink and blue Toco, I think, and heart rate monitor, and I was in the bath. And then I was talking to a lovely midwife, and I felt kind of like a spiritual connection with her in one moment, when she was holding my hand. So my husband Ross was holding my hand, but then she said to Ross, have you eaten today? I haven't seen you eat. Go and eat. And go and take a break while for this part. And then I was holding this lady's hand, and I asked her, do you have kids? And I was sort of also screaming in between, or breathing loudly. So it was a very interesting conversation. But I said, yeah, do you have kids? And she was telling me about how she had 3 daughters, but one of them had passed away, which probably sounds like a very intense thing to say to someone giving birth. But she said that was actually her journey to becoming a midwife. And she gave birth full term, and the baby passed away, unfortunately, and that's what inspired her to do this. And I don't just like she was holding my hand, and I felt like she was just this angel with such strength. And then she had 2 babies after 2 girls after that, and I was like, that's so empowering. And like in that moment, her telling me that, I was like, if she can go through that, and she's here looking after me. And just, yeah, it was a spiritual moment. I can't even explain it, Tracy. And it was, yeah, Ross sort of said, wow, like she shouldn't tell you that while you're about to give birth. But to me, it was just really powerful. And then,
Can I just come in there?
yeah, definitely.
I think when we're at the precipice of our cracking of the shell from the woman into the mother. It's a really intense moment of reckoning where you want to get off the bus, but you can't. And here you are right at that point of getting ready to push, not being able to push, needing to give your body a little bit more time to open. And then you have a woman who comes down, gives you eye contact, holds your hand, and speaks to you in that moment. It reminds you in that moment that this is what women have always done, and the strength that we have to get through all manner of things. If you think of all of the generations that have come before you and all of the generations that will come after you, and that women have brought life into the world since the beginning of time, it takes it from being oh gosh, vaginal birth, cesarean, epidural, not epidural, like we get caught on those details. But a moment like that of reckoning is a reminder of the power and the strength of women. And I think that's potentially, and please correct me if you feel I'm off track, but I can imagine why an experience like that was so profound and powerful, because it was based on connection. And she was offering you, if she could get through that, she was offering you that strength to go through with where you were at. Does that feel true, what I just said?
That's exactly, yeah, it's hard to, like, I've found it hard to articulate, but I think it was just this profound moment for me. And it felt like, yeah, she was giving me this extra power and everything. But then the doctors sort of came in and said, all right, we want to check you, jump out of the bath, which
Whoa.
also I had like
That'd be
those,
hard.
it was, and my legs were shaking a bit as well, Tracy, which I got the shakes, which I didn't know I would get. And so it was hard for me to walk. I had these wet belts on, and the monitors, the bands were all wet, and they like quickly come out, and the doctor's on shift or whatever, so they've got to. And again, it was that sort of feeling like a train station, everyone coming and going. And even at one point, I remember this person saying, hi, just saying hello. And that was one of the doctors. She reminded me of me on a good day, but like, that's not what you want when you're in birth. Like, I can appreciate that, but I didn't know who she was. And so anyway, they checked me and they said that that little part of the cervix hasn't gone. And so you've got two choices, epidural or cesarean. Um, and I said, okay, well, because the health of the baby at the end of the day is the most important thing to me. So if I have to go for that, I'll choose epidural. But it's just annoying after all that time pushing and going naturally, and I didn't even think I could do it. And even at the start of the day, I remember asking the midwife, when can I get the epidural? And she said, well, you can get it anytime. But I wanted to see how powerful my body could be and what I could do and how far I could go naturally. And so then they said, okay, we'll get the anaesthetist. And Ross, like, I didn't even know this, but Ross said all the lights went up. There was 10 people in the room with this thing now because she was coming, and it was just all intense. And then I remember people always saying, if you want an epidural, ask early because it takes a long time for them to come. And I remember someone in the room with me saying, where's the anaesthetist? And they said, oh, 30 to 40 minutes away. And then they said, no, we need the anaesthetist now. This is not just a nice to have. She needs it now because this is going serious. And it was going serious. Like, I didn't even know. I had my eyes closed or whatever. And then, yeah, my legs are shaking. And then the anaesthetist appeared next thing I knew. And she was a really sweet girl, and she had her mask on, but she was trying to explain things to me, but I couldn't hear. I was pushing. I was shaking. She brought her mask down. She came next to me because I couldn't hear over there. And she said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I need you to sit still. Here are the risks. I just thought in my head, I was thinking, I can't sit still. I'm shaking. I can't understand I just can't hear anything. I can't see anything. And then I just said, so sorry, I can't hear you right now. I need to push. And they were monitoring baby as well with the FCG monitor, which I'd always seen in photos, and I was really worried about that little needle in her head. But after that, like, it must have done something to Bub. I felt her go down more. And yeah, that's when I just said, look, I need to push. And then I just started like pushing, and the head started coming down. And then, yeah, and then everyone looked, and then the lights went down. The midwives kind of clapped, and I had 3 midwives in the end there because They were yeah, they were changing shifts. It was that time. And also I was thinking, I don't want, because it was around 8:40 and they said they finish at 9 or so. And I was like, I don't want a new midwife now. So I ended up having the midwife, yeah, one midwife that I'd had in the morning. She started her shift again in the evening, who was so lovely. And then a person who just graduated and her supervisor. So I had three. So I was very, very lucky. And they were all the three that clapped. Um, and yeah, and then 12 minutes later, she was out. I remember them sort of saying slow down because I almost felt a bit of anger from all this after going for so long and all these people coming and going and giving advice and someone telling me I need to have an epidural when I could feel bub coming. And so I just kind of pushed that into the giving birth, delivering. And they sort of said to me, like, just breathe, slow down. And I just thought, I don't want any advice. I'm doing what I'm doing. It was very intense feelings, like nothing I'd felt before. But I don't know, now that I look back on it, it's probably all those lovely hormones that I've had since I've given birth. But it just was like a really inspiring and powerful feeling. And then,
A
yeah.
lot of women describe second stage like that because they go from being sort of recipients of these sensations of contractions to then having some level of, I can actually do this now. I feel like I'm doing this, I'm pushing, and it can cause them to feel quite empowered by that particular phase. Alicia, you gave birth under extraordinary conditions of noise, people coming in and out, people saying random things, held fortunately by some really beautiful midwives, which was wonderful for you. Your experience in being able to overcome that, and you ultimately ended up with an unmedicated birth, which is not something you believe that you could do. Tell us, as you look back at that story, was there ever times, apart from, being curious about when you could have the epidural, were there ever times during that labour where you actually felt like you wanted the drugs?
I don't think so because I just always felt like, oh, it'll come a bit later. I was like, it just felt like such a long time. I was like, oh, you know, this is intense, but I'm getting through it. And so I just thought, well, if I can get through that, I think I can do the next. And it was just kind of bit by bit. I was like, I've
Yeah,
got through this one. I'll just get through, I'll just keep going until it's like unbearable. And it wasn't unbearable. It was full on, but it wasn't unbearable. And I just thought, oh, this is like, I'm really powerful. And also leading up to the day, I'd told my husband, I was like, I want it to be like a sports race. I used to be a swimmer. I was like, I'm going to do this like a big swimming event. And I even had my special purple Gatorade that I used to have with a straw and something about that and thinking of it like an endurance thing, like an event, that mindset kind of helped me a little bit as well. So I just thought I'm going to just keep going. I didn't feel like I needed to get the epidural at any moment, really. No,
Oh,
I
that's
didn't.
really interesting, isn't it? Because there was still a part of your mind that didn't think you could do it without it. But that's the point I want to make to those listening. Most of the time, we assume women are going to need the drugs. In my experience, it's the opposite. Most of the time, we don't need them. Sometimes, under certain conditions, it can be really appropriate. And we explore that in the course because I think that's a really important mental shift to start to make. It's just think of all the women who gave birth long before those drugs were ever invented. Don't tell me women can't do it. We always have and always will. What do you think the impact of not having the drugs had on your next phase when little Allegra landed?
Yeah, I was really worried as well because I'd done so much research and watched so many stories and things, and I'd seen blue babies coming out and yellow and all different colored babies, and watched things where I watched something where you like squeeze the foot and blow on the baby to make sure they cry straight away. So they gave me the baby, and I was doing that because I wanted. They're like, she's 3 seconds out, she's about to cry, and so she just looked so healthy. She was so pink. She was very alert. We had skin to skin contact straight away, and she found the breast, and we were able to breastfeed. And we've had a great breastfeeding journey ever since. I think that was one of the main things as well that I researched was the outcomes if you do have a natural birth, the benefits for the baby. And I think, the midwives were quite surprised because I was talking to her as well. I was like, it's not just me going through this, it's Allegra too. And I was like, come on, baby, I love you. Like, we're doing this. And I was just thinking as well, what an intense feeling it must be for her. Like she's been in my womb all that time. Now she's coming out to the world. So that gave me strength. It was kind of that mama instinct. I was like, she's going through this. I've got to be strong for her. And she was strong for me all those weeks when I was going through stresses at work. I just always felt like I had a superpower. So yeah, that kind of
You're being primed. You are being primed when you're pregnant to be the mother. You're being prepared for it. And it's a journey all the way through pregnancy and birth, then that heightened experience where everything goes into full force is designed not only to get the baby here, obviously, but designed to wake you up that you are so much more than what you think. And I love how you've been able to link that then to post-birth, because people will often say to pregnant women, oh, have the drugs, without appreciating what they're actually advising people to do and what the residual effects are around the whole journey. It's not a simple thing. It's a big choice, and it has residual effects on both the mother and the baby for that post-birth period as well. People make it sound like it's a walk in the park. Now, it doesn't mean that it isn't appropriate, because the emotional state of the mother is paramount when it comes to birth. And so the drugs can be very helpful for some women, but most of the time we actually don't need them, particularly when we've got other ways of finding comfort. So you've had an extraordinary journey, and you've painted a great picture of the ins and outs and the little things that can happen that can really throw people off their center in the birth process. What sort of advice or thoughts would you like to finish with to give a pregnant woman?
Yeah, well, something else I'd just like to add as well is my husband. I remember someone saying to him, "Oh, don't go down that end. It's like watching your favorite pub burn down."
Oh,
And I just thought that's such an awful thing to say and I remember sharing that with you, and I was so awful. But he was down there. He caught Allegra, and I'm lucky to have a partner. I know not everyone does, but if you do have a partner or a husband or whoever, I'd encourage them to go down and see and catch the baby and cut the umbilical cord, because that was really beautiful for him. Also, I was due to have a photographer, but because of all the changes and everything, I ended up cancelling. It was giving me too much anxiety. But one of the midwives took a lot of photos, and that might sound a bit intense, but they're my most treasured possession to look back and see what I went through.
yeah.
And they're not glamorous at all, but to see, her coming out and everything. I think you can do anything, and also think of the natural high you can get if you can deliver naturally and there's no complications. Obviously, if something like that happens, I'd say go with the medical advice if it's an emergency. But if you're in a good, healthy pregnancy, you can get through it, and it's better than any, night out you've had on all the wines or any drugs you can have. It's a natural high, and I feel
Yeah.
that lasted so long, and it's really set me up for success. And now I know how powerful I am, and I can take that through with me for life to see what I've gone through. So yeah, that's what I'd say. And you can do it, and you don't have to be a hippy dippy person or anything. You can be skeptical, and you can do it.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Alicia's
Tracy.
story is an absolutely treasured story. What wonderful detail she's gone into, and I'm sure people listening have really appreciated that. So the message is, you can do this. Your body knows what to do. You were born to do this. And sometimes we need help, and that's okay too. So thanks again for listening, and we'll see you again next week. Bye for now. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe and share this podcast. This episode has been brought to you by Transform Parenting, an organisation that provides courses, coaching and community from pregnancy through to the first 7 years of a child's life. It is a place where you can learn, get support and grow into your role as a parent. Why not take advantage of a special gift for all pregnant women at transformyourbirth.com.au. Or if you have children, we have a gift for parents also.